Welcome to TradeTheMBA.com. This is John's report. Is for the 25th. Well, we saw the reversal taking place the other day. We had the massive move up, back down in there, but we had created what was within constraints buy signal within the daily. So there you have that. Will it last? It remains to be seen, but unlikely coming from this deepest shakeout reading. We just follow with what it is. Shorts still active within the setup. That it'll be critical to see the green and cyan mix, but we'll see it intraday, and that's where I've been saying the action definitely is. And of course, narratives make a difference. So you can talk about your war, then you talk about peace, you stave off major market, but this has been a significant downturn in general, irrespective of adding to it. The real question is, from a NASDAQ standpoint, you see the exact same readings, but you don't have the same buy signal that the S&P. So you have a divergence, but the extreme, fairly decent there with no dips below the red line. Those are bullish configurations, but definitely need to see more of a dip of the orange here for NASDAQ if it's going to be congruent between multiple markets. So at this particular point, it's just the S&P recovering a bit. And, you still don't have, fine, it's a drop from where we were, but, you're still in the upper 80s for oil, which puts you, in disaster zone. And, you're going to have to make up for that lag. So there's going to be some persistence. It's not going to recover anytime quickly. And I think potential for the midterms does not look good unless really able to flip things pretty strong, because this is going to last into and really start to affect the end of the year. From an affordability standpoint, the whole thing's that been the narrative. So while they tout this, that, and the other, they may have already conceded that the election, for the midterms was lost anyway, since they couldn't get things done and get oil where they wanted it to. So, capitulations, like, you already know that you've lost the game, so you might as well just do some of the stuff you want to do regardless, because you're not going to change anything. This has been super supportive of the euro. Who knows why? Potentially moving out of a buy configuration here, as the orange potentially could move above. We'll see if that takes place, but the dollar isn't going anywhere despite the procrastination. Everyone's got this idea of the end of the dollar, blah 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 blah. You got to have a replacement for that to be. And is this it? Bitcoin in that? You really think that after a 50% dip, people are going to be all that excited? No, it's going to have to recover quite strongly. Do we have readings for that yet? No. Is it trying? Yeah, well, the orange is able to dip all the way down and you get a turnaround move to the upside. Yeah, potentially, like we had back here. But it really didn't produce a whole lot because you never had a steel reset. And here we're getting that reset with the dip of steel below cyan and that, but it's already going to be elevated by the time it crosses above cyan for a positive push. So what do you really get from that? Where we really saw it was, again, the 5K, some phenomenal movement. And also just interesting from a reading standpoint, where you start to begin very clearly in these kind of big days to see the correlation between your peaks of MBI readings matching your spikes with orange and that coming off green. So the orange moving above green would be your short signal, but you already had the preemptive idea that the peak was nearing an end right there. Then you end up with the lower dips, and then as soon as you take out the previous high, you get the next move back up. And then it becomes really clear as you get towards this middle part of the pre-market here. We had the peak followed by the orange peak, and then boom, you ended up with lower peaks. But then as soon as it starts to turn around, you're like, okay, maybe that's the end of it, but made it continue low. But then right here, you start to get higher peaks until it breaks down. And that's just a matter of looking for where that matches with buy signals versus then sell signals, which in this particular case is the orange under green and then orange above green. And as you see that cycle rotate over and over and over again, becomes pretty clear. And you can see I even have this chart marked the P2, P3s. Those would be your red DOC pivots higher. And particularly in a downturn, is relevant because it usually takes P2, P3. You get a lower low, and you'll end up with a higher pivot, like right here. And so that's the build of a long setup. So then you're just looking for that orange dip in between, and can it sustain itself? In this particular case, it happened several times. Stayed with it, and right there you ended up with the MBI weight and the rejection. So it was just a few bars later before you got the orange spike to the short side. Didn't dip very far, but still was a pretty significant move. And then we ended up with a lot of just sideways action that was somewhat bullish. So even from our setup, the thing is, when you look at these, the ranges from the conversion, the 601 to 630 is 30 some points. It's a big move overall. It's not hard to gauge that even when you look at it from a short side. The 42 all the way until you get the buy, which was down at 33. This is 10 good points, even if you follow just the paint bar and not if you had a trailing stop, you get all the way into those dips. But towards the end of the day, they started to fade it a little bit. Got people excited for a new short setup, and that was a pretty significant move. And then a little bit of a turnaround there, and then a little higher pivot, and boom, peaked out right at the top there. And then we ended up with selling all the way through until just at the end of the day, and things got exciting. And that's when they were announcing that they may have their deal in the works, that a ceasefire is going to go. And didn't really have much choice. The clock was ticking. There was no way you could continue without getting traffic moving and getting the Hormuz. For a lot of things, this even affects the growing season. It's just not as sustainable. So unless you're literally going to, invade to secure it or start, running ships through there to protect it. But see, the cost politically was too high. You couldn't put a U.S. ship in the Strait of Hormuz, and that because it only takes one incident that looks like you've lost. They were complaining about, they've done 8,000 sorties and 2 planes get knocked down, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, and it's like, really? From a perspective standpoint, no, but that's not how the world works. The world works on perspective. So it's about the narrative and how those play out. So we had our up move, peak matching with the orange at this particular point. So you ended up with double whammy sell signal right there. And that's where you get, stronger moves. And this is just becomes an understanding that each of these represents their own level of activity, and when they all start to move together in congruence is when you get your most effective displays, particularly when you have an MBI weight spike that matches with a nice bounce or spike of DOC orange. Completely different readings, but when they correspond like that, it becomes pretty effective from that. And then you get the wide dispersal at a DOC spread, and as that increases, that you've got movement. But when it gets too wide, it's got to narrow back down again, and that's where you get your flip back up to the upside. And then when it gets too small, you don't really have much of an edge when that happens. So you have to wait for the expansions. Plain and simple. And that keeps it sort of the general concept of where I look in the programming aspect of it to monitor how these expansions and contractions take place and why they're looking for the volatility variations as far as supply excess of that. And that's what really drives things. In this particular case, it's a nice time because the drives are so extreme. I mean, we're actually, when you see this in a normal day, maybe you're going to get 10, 12 points total move. Here we're getting, 50, 60 points within minutes of that. So the extra speed of things just makes it neat from a visual standpoint to be able to put it together, because otherwise you'd be looking over, this huge range of the entire chart in order to get what you get to see in a microcosm of just a few bars going across. So that's kind of neat from that standpoint. Anyway, long and short of it, we got it dialed in. So that's all that matters. Anyway, trade well. Have a good one. Anything relevant, I'll put in the team chat.